Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the Fine Gardening Soil Health webinar. Our guest, Kirsten Kurtz, is the Assistant Director at Cornell University Soil Health Laboratory, where she received her Master's of Science degree from the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment at Cornell back in 2021. Her research was focused on soil health and remnant prairie lands, grasslands, and we'll introduce her now. Here she is, Kirsten Kurtz.
Hi, thank you, Carol. Nice to see
Thank,
everyone.
yes, thank you for joining us. Um, so you have we have just published your most recent article with us, is Soil Care for Challenging Circumstances, and that is in the current issue of Fine Gardening on newsstands now.
Yes.
And you can find this on page 22 or on our website, finegardening.com. Um, you were going to start with a bit of a presentation to sort of get our feet wet, so to speak, with soil.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. Thank you again, Carol, so much for having me. I love working with fine gardening, and it's such a privilege to be able to talk about soil with this audience. So, I'm the assistant director of the Cornell Soil Health Lab at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And I'm a soil scientist. I'm also a lifelong gardener and an artist. So I had to sneak in a couple of my paintings today. I paint with soil. This is one of my paintings here on the screen called Three Sisters in Soil. And it's about, the three sisters of agriculture and sustainable um, agriculture, companion planting, things like that. But today I'm going to be talking about soil health in challenging situations. And I'm going to start by kind of talking about what soil health is, a couple key points that are important to understand about soil health, and then get into some real life scenarios and tips for improving them. All right, so soil health is really about the capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. Like that's the formal definition of soil health. When I think about soil health, I think about looking at the biological aspects of soil, like the life of the soil, the physical aspects of the soil, like the structure, and the chemical aspects, which would be your nutrients, your pH, together in a holistic way. So we're interested in understanding how those aspects of soil are interacting amongst each other and how they're affecting your ability to grow plants. I wanted to mention briefly our lab, mostly because we have a lot of really good resources available. So we have a great website that has our book, we call it a manual, about soil health assessments that's available as a free download. We have a lot of fact sheets that simplify the type of concepts that we talk about, and we have a lot of videos. So I do recommend our website as a good reference. All right, so soil is actually not a solid, right? Soil is only about half solid. And by that, I'm talking about like the minerals, the rocks, the worn down rocks and the organic matter. And in a healthy soil system, that those solids form aggregates, right? So aggregates are kind of like little crumbs in the soil. You can see some in this picture on the screen. I'm holding them in my hand. And a healthy soil, you can, like, if I see a soil with well-formed aggregates, like what you see here, I know that it's a healthy soil without having to even test it. Partially because the life of the soil is what helps to form those aggregates. So worms and roots have exudates, which basically are those sticky substances. If you pick up a worm and it's kind of sticky, that helps to hold together those aggregates. And a lot of the microscopic life of the soil is living within those aggregates and around the aggregates. And the thing that's really important about this is that pore space, because that allows for drainage and it allows for the roots to reach down and access the nutrients from the deeper places in the soil profile. And it in general just kind of shows a healthier system. And there's different sizes of aggregates, as you can see also here on the screen. So there are more organisms in a healthy teaspoon of soil than people on the planet or visible objects in the night sky. It's amazing and mind-blowing how diverse and abundant the soil life system is. Most of the life of soil that I'm talking about, the microscopic life, is made up by microbes, bacteria, and fungi. And they give us really important ecosystem services, including decomposing that soil organic matter, increasing that nutrient availability and storage. And also, we know that a healthy soil will actually help protect plants against pathogens. And of course, that life is increasing that aggregation and pore space that I was just talking about on that last slide. So, moving into some of the typical challenging situations that we would see specifically in gardening, one of the leading challenges is compaction. So, compaction, of course, is typically caused by, weight on the surface of the soil. So, that could be foot weight, like people walking on the soil. It could be your tractor driving on the soil, your lawn tractor, etc. It's also caused by tillage, especially if the soil is wet. So it's really important not to till your soil when it's wet because it has a tendency to really compact those pore spaces more than what would happen if the soil was more friable. Sometimes compaction is also caused by natural activities like glaciers. Where I live, the glaciers came across New York State and compacted the soil, like the subsurface of our soil. So that can happen naturally as well. And then we know that clay soil, of course, is especially vulnerable to compaction. And also, it's important to understand that compaction can happen at different layers within the soil profile. So we can have surface crusting, which, keeps the rain from infiltrating in, for instance. You can have compaction in your top 6 inches, typically from tillage, or you can have that deeper compaction from deep tillage or from natural causes. Fortunately, there's a lot of solutions for addressing soil compaction. Of course, the top thing is like try not to compact it in the first place, but I know that that's not always possible. But you can do a lot of soil loosening in a mechanical way, either with machinery or by hand. In a garden, I think by hand is pretty low labor. You can use a broad fork, for instance, like we see here on the screen. And then mechanical options are an aerator or a subsoiler. But then also like top dressing with compost or mulch does a lot because then the worms are going to come up from deeper in the soil profile, pull that organic matter down. So you can top dress and really address deeper compaction, which is a great option. And then of course, deeper rooted cover crops. I know cover crops aren't necessarily a great option for gardening, but some of them can be really beautiful, like buckwheat, and still break up that compaction deeper in the system. So there are options to consider, even in like a beautiful landscape with cover crops. All right, another leading challenge is roadside plantings. I learned from a friend of mine who's a big gardener, they call them hell strips, that section next to the road where it can get really hot, especially, and where I live, they put salt on the roads. So it can also get really salty. So that's can cause like a major problem. A lot of plants can't handle heat, can't handle salt. There's often problems with drainage, foot traffic, and then you have to be extremely careful with your plant species selection. So when I think about planting by the road, the first thing I think about is raised beds. As much as you can kind of lift your soil up, through maybe integrating some types of soil mixes that you buy, mulching, compost, those types of things that will really help with heat problems. And then also the salt. The best thing that you can do about salt in your soil, which can also come from like over fertilization, or it can also happen in areas that don't get a lot of rain, is deep watering. Like flush it out as much as you can. You know, sometimes you actually have to like irrigate it to really just flush that salt out of your soil, but that is very effective. And then again, of course, like the species selection, right? Thinking about like what is going to be able to handle it. You know, daylilies are a favorite of mine. You know, where I live, you see a lot of daylilies around along the roads, and like what a beautiful option. All right, and then the last like leading situation I'm going to talk about as far as a challenging situation with soil is disturbed soil. So we see this most often when people are doing, you know, renovations on their house, or they're building a new house or something like that. And, you know, the contractors will come in and they remove all of the topsoil. And then they drive over the subsoil, you know, as they're doing their work. And then typically they bring back in the topsoil, or they buy some topsoil, throw grass seed in it, and kind of call it done. And I get a ton of questions here at Cornell about like, why isn't my grass doing well? And typically it's because of a situation like this. So, um, the main thing that you can do for this situation is before you bring back in that topsoil, you want to decompact your subsoil. So come in with like probably a mechanical aerator, something like that, and like break up that subsoil, and then bring back in your topsoil, or, you know, buy new topsoil, whatever it is. But then you need to test that topsoil. You know, so like I'm a lab person, so of course I'm going to say test your soil, but it really is important before you start making decisions, before you even decide on plant species, to test your soil, amend it if it needs it. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is going to be incorporating a lot of different kinds of organic matter. Also, living mulch, you know, like keeping your soil covered is incredibly important for soil health. All right, so soil health management can seem really complicated. And when I was first learning about it, I've been here for about 15 years now. When I was first learning about soil health management, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so complicated, specific cover crops for specific things, etc. But as I learned about it more, I realized it really came down to six key concepts. So if you think about that life of the soil, you should be feeding that life of the soil, of course, right? So I kind of think of this idea of like feed your underground herd, right? And the best ways that you can do that are like increasing organic matter. You'll hear me say this over and over, and a wide variety, you know, like stable organic matter that's going to take time to break down. Organic matter that will break down more quickly, like compost, you know, having that diverse sources of organic matter is going to make a more resilient system. Cover, you know, having some kind of cover on your soil. Soil is very vulnerable when there's no cover. That's when you're going to have erosion issues and things like that. Increasing diversity. So we know that certain organisms only like certain plants. So the more different types of like species and plants you have in your system, the more of a diverse and resilient soil microbial system you will have. You also, of course, want to control traffic, right? So, like, if possible, you know, drive in the same spot, walk in the same spot, you know, don't compact your gardens in any way, and you're just going to be so much more successful. And especially in a wet situation, like if the soil's wet, you know, so you should be looking for the soil to be friable. So, like, if you pick up a big chunk of soil and you drop it, it falls apart, right? That's when it's good to plow. Most gardeners, of course, know this, but I don't know if everyone knows how important it is to avoid plowing when it's wet or tilling. And then, of course, like reducing tillage as much as possible. If you have like a lot of organic matter, a really rich system in a beautiful backyard garden, you can get away with tillage more than maybe what I would recommend for big agricultural uses. But you still should only do that maybe once a year, if possible. All right, so then thinking about those concepts, of course, like those soil health concepts can kind of apply to anything, but I wanted to take a minute to talk about how you can apply those concepts to backyard gardening. So, when I'm talking about organic matter, the mulch is amazing, like mulch, compost, that's the really some of the best forms of organic matter for gardening. And then, of course, like I said, cover crops maybe not realistic for you, but keeping a cover on your soil easily can be. Like a famous old saying is like, "Don't farm naked," right? Like, make sure you have some kind of cover, and that could be perennials, it could be, annuals that you're getting started early, things along those lines. And then, again, thinking about that diversity, rotating those annuals, keep track of what you plant when really like try to get as much diversity as possible in your garden. And then, of course, just, tilling when the conditions are right. It'll make a huge difference. And then with that, I would say I'm ready for questions. Thanks.
All right. That was fantastic. And it feels like, maybe some of the questions people had in their minds have already been answered, but we do have some that were submitted in advance. First up, soil respiration. Shelly B from Facebook is curious about what is soil respiration and why is it important?
Yeah, so soil respiration is very important. We measure soil respiration in our lab. And really the rest, microorganisms breathe out CO2 just like we do. And the way that we measure respiration in our lab is that we take a known weight of soil and we put it in like a closed jar for 4 days with a little trap of this chemical called KOH that captures that CO2, and then we're able to measure it. And what this tells us is not, like what species of microorganisms you have or really how many you have. It's more about like how are they functioning? How active is your microbial community? And we've been able to tie that directly to how healthy your soil is overall.
Very interesting. And the main idea is that a surprising amount of air moves in and out of those pore spaces, right? In undisturbed soil.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also like literally capturing the CO2 that the microbial community is breathing out, just like we do.
Right,
So then we
right.
have an idea like, how well are they doing in there? Like,
Yeah.
are they active and things along those lines?
That is fascinating. I don't think many people imagine that their soil breathes, but
Yeah,
it explains why the pore spaces are so important to maintain, right?
exactly.
Okay. We have a question through email from Candace, and it is, are coffee grounds good or bad for the soil?
Yeah, so coffee grounds, I would say in general they're good. They're acidic. So typically like I personally would use coffee grounds on like my blueberries, for instance, right? But if you compost the coffee grounds, then they're so much better. So I just add my coffee grounds to my compost, you know what I mean, and know that that's like improving my compost. And you can add it right to your soil, but I think like it's a little dangerous because you can potentially like burn your plants if you do it, depending on how much coffee you drink, maybe.
Right. When it comes right down to it, it's just more organic matter, right?
Yeah, but it's a little acidic. So
Yes.
ideally you're composting it first.
Yes, very good. And I wonder if people are tempted to use it, right on the top of the soil because it's so black and beautiful and it makes it look like you have great soil. That might explain it. Okay. Um, from George Baker, also through email, what is the deal with black walnut and what does it do? Is it bad for the soil?
Yeah, so black walnuts are what is it? Allelopathic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what that means, and there's multiple plants like this, that the tree excretes a chemical out of its roots that makes it so that other plants don't want to grow there. So typically I would say if you have a black walnut, like I wouldn't really even bother trying to grow vegetables underneath a black walnut. It will fail. Like I can speak from experience, but there are some things that do really well. So one thing that does really well is raspberries or like blackberries. I believe also like roses do well. So there are some options for landscaping, but my last farm, we had a gigantic black walnut tree and we were growing a bunch of like vegetables and fruits and things like that. And we tried, even garlic couldn't make it underneath the black walnut, So we ended up going with raspberries and, like big ones that you pick, really nice raspberries, and they do great. So I learned in Intro to Soils here at Cornell, like it's so much better to plant what is gonna do well in your soil than try to change it. And when it comes to black walnuts, unless you're gonna cut the tree down, which I wouldn't recommend, and even if you do, the roots are gonna take a long time to break down. You got to just try to work with it.
Um, I'm curious if the juglone, I think that's the poison, right?
Yep.
It doesn't, it's just other plants. It's not killing the soil life, I wouldn't imagine.
No, yeah, it's just other plants, as far as I know. I'm sure it probably does affect like certain microbial communities, but I haven't heard about that. And I think that in general, I've noticed that soil under black walnuts looks great. It's just that's all you're going to grow is black walnuts.
Right, lots of organic matter, but it's got juglone in it.
Yeah.
All right. Um, let's see. We have uh, Garden Soul 45 on Instagram asked, tilling alternative. What is the real story here? Like, what's the alternative to tilling, I guess?
Yeah, I think so, let's say you're turning your lawn into a garden, for instance, you pretty much need to come and till it at least the first time, right? I I just got a new house and I'm working on landscaping and I did turn over my gardens with a shovel last year. And this year I'm gonna like get somebody to come over with a tiller and till it up. And then hopefully after that I can maintain it with a shovel. So of course, you can get out there with a shovel. There's a lot of really good methods for like building raised beds, especially where you kind of make the path and flip it into the raised bed. Um, Tillage is more of an issue in large scale agriculture with this really heavy equipment, creating this very serious compaction layer underneath the surface than what we would see in gardens. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like tillage or you do it by hand, sweat equity. Those are your options, as far as I know.
Yeah, I would like to offer that. No, I have sandy soil, but in my vegetable garden, I have never rototilled ever. Everything has been by hand, so it is possible. It is a lot of work, but what I do is I keep a layer of organic mulch over the surface at all times, and so weeds are less of an issue, and I have never rototilled in there. So,
That's amazing.
yeah. But
Yeah,
the sandy soil is very helpful. Not everyone
yeah,
has it.
it's gonna totally depend on where you are. Like if you have clay soil or even like some of the really, the prairie soil is like really, really dense. Where I live, I was able to do it, but I would say my garden ended up like half as big as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Before
Right.
I was like, okay, that's good.
Right. We have a question from email from Trisha asking, double digging, adding organic matter, is it necessary? Double digging, that's an old one.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend who's a master gardener and he swears by double digging. I know that it went through a stage of being extremely popular. Um, I personally don't do it, but I think that there's nothing wrong with the method. You know what I mean? It's a really great way to get that organic matter deeper into the soil profile.
Okay. Alrighty. Um, we have Seed Saver 45 from the forum says, does it make sense to add mycelium to garden soil? And can you buy it from anywhere?
Yeah, so I learned recently that you can buy mycelium, I think even from like Amazon or what have you. I don't know how great of a soil amendment it would be. Just because mycelium in a natural system is going to be, it's basically like around the roots, you know what I mean? It's kind of this zone around the roots, and it's part of that relationship between the roots and the soil, helping the plants like grab nutrients and things like that. So to me, I think about it as being part of the system that you would want to try to encourage more than something that you would be buying. I assume like dried mycelium. I imagine it's organic matter, so it wouldn't hurt, but I personally don't know exactly how beneficial it would be.
Right, because it's the living mycelium that form in your soil, that's what's really the benefit and what's connecting with our plant roots and whatnot, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what like dead mycelium would do really besides, but I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
I
Yes.
just learned about this recently, so maybe it's great, but my guess is really it's just adding organic matter, which
Yeah.
won't hurt.
And also, an argument for not tilling because I'm guessing when you till, you're breaking up any living mycelium that are in your soil and putting them maybe in a different spot where they can't, function.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the danger of tillage is that so like most microbes don't move, like most of that little microbial life of the soil doesn't move more than like an inch or two in its life, right? So it wants to be, there's like surface microbes, there's subsurface microbes, right? So then you take this like deeper soil and you flip it up, those that microbial community might not necessarily function very well on the surface level. So, that can be an issue, but at that point, it would kind of like die and start to break down. So it would kind of give you this boost of
Hmm.
fertility, but big picture, you might be reducing your overall health and your overall fertility.
That makes perfect sense. Okay. A Facebook question. How often should we be adding organic matter, and is compost better than a chemical fertilizer? I guess is what they mean by fertilizer.
Yeah, you should add organic matter every year for sure. You know what I mean? You should always be feeding your soil. It should be a nonstop thing, in the spring, you know, incorporating organic matter, of course, and then, maybe making sure you have cover throughout your season. So that's breaking down. That's always going to be helpful. Um, as far as like, is compost better than chemical fertilizer, it depends, of course. All compost isn't created equal. So if you're buying compost, it's good to get results for that. Like it should be on the bag, say like how much nitrogen's in it, how much phosphorus, etc. And you should look at that and make an educated decision. Or if you're buying compost from like a company where they're going to like drop it off with a dump truck or something like that, make sure you talk to them and get the results of their test. Because like just like soil, compost gets tested by labs and we know what to look for, right? So, like there's plenty of great, I'm not anti-chemical fertilizers by any means, you know what I mean? It probably is easier than adding natural forms of fertilizer, but I personally was raised on organic gardening and I garden organic. So I always work with natural forms of fertilizer. I really like back guano is a great one. You know what I mean? Like you can find really rich, amazing fertilizers that are completely organic. So either way can be fine depending on the type of person you are, I think.
Right. And that, you're testing your soil and only adding as much fertilizer as is needed rather than because it's the excess fertilizer that ends up in our waterways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So especially nitrogen,
Yeah,
right? So like
especially.
if you're adding too much chemical nitrogen, it just like runs out, runs through, goes into our waterways, creates these big anoxic zones in our ocean where like there's no oxygen in the water. So um, that's way less likely to happen with like an organic matter based fertilizer because that's going to be more likely to kind of bind up in your soil and stay there.
That makes sense. Right. Okay. We have an email question from Jesse P. Do pesticides damage the soil or soil life, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, pesticides kill pests, right? So, to a certain degree, it certainly is going to be affecting that life of your soil. I would say there's times that we, have to use pesticides, even maybe you're organic, and there's, organic forms of pesticides, of course, like copper or things along those lines that you might need to add because you have some kind of like an outbreak of pests on your plants. So when I'm thinking about pesticides, I would just say like use them minimally, use them, only when you really have to, follow the directions really, really carefully, and look into like, are there alternative forms? There's a lot of natural options for pesticides. But if you have to use, chemical pesticides, sometimes, that's just how it goes. But just make sure that you use it like thoughtfully, carefully, try to keep it on the plants themselves, don't do it right before it rains, things along those lines.
Okay. Um, Final question that we had submitted in advance from Alicia in Florida. Is store-bought soil better than my native soil?
Yeah. Okay. So like scientists were famous for being like, it depends, but like
Right.
it depends.
For sure.
Right. So, you could have amazing soil. I have no idea, right? You could have completely amazing soil that would be way better than some store-bought soil, or your soil could have like a lot of really serious problems and you need to get store-bought soil. I will say a lot of times when people reach out to me kind of like freaking out about their soil, it's because they bought topsoil and then it ended up not being good. You know what I mean? Like, so that is a really common thing that I hear about. And I'm always telling people, like, please ask the company to test the soil and show you the results before you buy it from them. Like, I hear about people getting it with like a lot of plastic in it or debris, or it could have like no fertility or who knows, So don't just kind of think like, oh, you're buying soil, it's all the same. It's not all the same at all. And then there's also a really big difference between like a soil like growing media, right?
Yes.
And soil.
Yes.
And that's another really big thing that I think people get a little confused about sometimes. Like a growing media is going to be, like compost and like maybe vermiculite and like whatever, right? Like a bunch of different materials
Yes.
and then they mix it really well. And that often is great because like they know what they're doing. They're making something that's going to do well. Um but it's only going to have so much fertility in it, of course. And it's kind of hard to beat like your native soil, assuming it's at all reasonably good, because you also have it's like so deep.
Yeah.
And that's really important, like to have that depth there that helps so much with like drainage. And then, you have like the rocks really, that the soil was formed from, like really deep in the system that are breaking down and releasing nutrients. And like, I'm always pro like real soil if you can do it.
Absolutely.
Mineral soil.
Yes. For container gardening, uh, like we never recommend, digging the soil out of your garden, putting it in there to save money. A
Oh yeah,
soilless mix is the answer in containers for sure.
I
Um,
agree.
I wanted to ask our behind the scenes producer, Christine, if there is if there are any questions that have come from the Q&A while we've been chatting here.
Yeah, we've got several questions actually. So I am happy to read those off. Um let's see. Kirsten, you may have addressed this a little bit, but Melody had asked when planting turf or borders in a new build housing development, should they bring in topsoil or would it be better to mend the existing soil with compost? Maybe you could kind of review.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, well, was the topsoil removed? Is the topsoil, I guess the first thing I would do is test the soil that's there, right? And see what you have. And then you can make decisions about if it, is going to function well, what type of amendments you need to do. So like a nutrient analysis lab, they're all over the country. You typically can test your soil just for like nutrients, organic matter, pH for extremely low cost, like $20 or something a sample, and you'll typically get those results in like a week, right? So that's a really good, it's cheap, it's fast, just go out there, take really good samples. We have, really good videos on our website about like how to properly take a soil sample. It's also important that you sample appropriately, sample in the right areas, send it in, look at the results, and then make your decision. You can't make that decision without assessing your soil first.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'll drop a link to a testing your soil video that we also have on our website, and I'll try to find the one from Cornell as well. And put that in. So I'm making back here behind the scenes, I'm making a resource list for anything we've kind of discussed and touched on that I will also send out after the webinar is ended with some of these links. Um, but thank you for that answer. Um, we had a couple questions actually about jumping worms and their impact on soil life and keeping the soil healthy. Is that something you could speak to?
Yeah, we have jumping worms here. Um, they're pretty amazing for anyone who hasn't seen them. They're really big and they're really fast. Like they're just the first time I saw one, I was like, what? I had no idea a worm could move that fast. Um, Around here, the typically what I hear about how people kind of introduce them to their gardens is through mulch piles. So a lot of areas, I'm sure all over the country, but definitely here, we have these huge mulch piles that the municipalities just leave, and like anyone in from the public can go and help themselves load up your truck and bring mulch home, which seems great. But unfortunately, jumping worms really love mulch. So I do not recommend that. If you don't have them, you probably don't want to introduce them to your garden. And the reason for that is that they um, eat and burn down organic matter in this phenomenal speed. So our native worms that we have here, which actually also were introduced, I don't think that North America had worms at all before 250 years ago or whatever. But basically, the worms that we typically have here in the United States break down organic matter somewhat slowly. They put channels through the soil, which like makes more pore space. Like pretty much in general, you can say they're very beneficial, right? Like everyone, if you have a lot of worms in your garden, great. That's a great sign that you're doing a good job. Jumping worms, unfortunately, it's not a sign that you're not doing a good job, but they can just like eat that organic matter so incredibly quickly that it's really hard to stay ahead of that. Um, so if you already have them, I do not think there's anything you can do about it. Sorry, hopefully someone will figure that out in the future, but you should be adding a lot more organic matter than you normally would.
Yes. The other thing that from a gardener standpoint, don't share plants. If you're jumping worm positive, don't put free plants on your local forum because you're spreading the problem.
Yep.
So yeah, and be cautious of gift plants too. Our local gardening forum here in Newtown, we will, people will be like, jumping worm positive, only take these plants if you've got them too.
That's nice of them. Consider it.
Right.
Great.
Do we have any other questions from the forum, Christine?
We do. We still have some coming in.
Excellent.
Trying to sort through. So let's see. Many soil tests evaluate a soil. Okay, this is a longish
It's okay.
question. Okay, this is from Rachel. Rachel asks, most soil tests evaluate a soil only with respect to a certain crop, and recommendations are often targeted for like agricultural or exotic ornamental plants. That's an assumption. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Is that true?
Uh,
Like, I don't know if she means like home soil tests or.
I mean, there's so many different types of
Mhm.
soil tests, and I understand what she's saying.
Okay. Well, so her question is if she wanted to know what the local soil characteristics should be in order to support native plant communities in the region where she lives. I guess it has a naturally acidic soil where she is. Is there a soil test that will take that into account and not just tell her to add lime?
Yeah. Okay, so our lab, we don't actually make like specific nutrient recommendations. We make short and long-term management suggestions that can be applicable to basically any type of cropping system. So like we work with, big ag, we work with landscapers, zoos, like botanic gardens, backyard gardeners, vegetable farmers, like anything you can imagine. So the way we approach this is providing the information and then letting the farmers make their own decisions about how they're going to address the short and long term constraints that we identify within our lab, right? So, like that said, it's really important to understand what your, let's say, like native soil was. So, we talk a lot here about benchmarking or comparison sampling. And it's a really important approach. So let's say you have 5 acres and you've been managing most of it. But there's probably some areas on your, let's say, small farm that you're not managing, right? Like, so that could be found underneath like a fence row that's been there for a really long time, or kind of like, near the border between you and the neighbor, something like that. So you try to identify and find an area that hasn't been managed that hopefully is close to what your soil was naturally, and you take a sample there. And then you also sample from your garden or whatever you're interested in understanding or improving. So then what you end up with is a target and what you have, and then you have somewhere to go. You could also take, let's say you don't have something that could stand in as what I would call like a remnant soil. Then you could say, this part of my garden is like the best. Everything is doing super well here. And this part over here is struggling. You would sample those separately, again, creating a target. So that would be the approach that I would recommend. But then I would also say, there's this thing called Soil Web. It's from the NRCS. And it's a little bit complicated to use, but there's also an app that's super easy to use called Soil Web, also, I believe, that basically you can just like go out in your yard, push the button. I recommend the app because you have to kind of get trained to use the web version. Um, Hit the button and it will tell you like this is your soil type. This is what your typical organic matter is. This is your typical pH. This is your typical like depth to water table, your depth to stone, all of those types of things. And then that will tell you so much more information than frankly you need about like what your native soil is. Because we have mapped that out for our whole country. Like we know what soil is under our feet pretty much everywhere. Not me, scientists have.
Right. That's
I wish.
fascinating, though. Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
Oh,
great.
it's a great resource. Like the Soil Web app, I use it constantly, like, because I go to farms and like help people individually sometimes. And that's the first thing I do. I'm like, oh, and because I'm a soil scientist, I know what it means. I'm like, oh, okay, you have a glacial till, and this is your typical depth to plow pan. And almost always the farmers or the growers, whoever it is, will be like, yeah, I've noticed the plow pan. And then you can find the where it changes too, right? Because like even my place, I have 2 acres. There's like 3 or 4 different types of soil on my place going up the hill. You know what I mean? And you can
Mhm.
tell. You're like, oh, now I'm digging in that better, deeper soil. Like, it's cool. Anyway,
What was the name of that resource again, Kirsten?
it's the soil. I'll just check my phone really quick, but it's the soil web. That came out of UC Davis.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yep, I see it.
Yep. It's a yeah, soil web. And then the NRCS has their own version also. It's pretty much the same thing. It's basically just like so after the Dust Bowl, the NRCS was formed and folks went across our entire country and mapped out all the soil by like digging pits, identifying like what type of species like to grow with those different soil types, and then they were able to they didn't dig a hole everywhere, right? But like they could learn what you would typically find under different circumstances and then, make assumptions, highly educated assumptions about what was everywhere.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Um, oh, and Chris, thank you for finding that resource as well online. That's in the chat for anyone looking for it. I'm wondering if you would be open to, Kirsten, a couple of sort of quick fire, like, what should I add for this problem? I don't know
I'll
if
do
that
my best.
is that
Yeah.
is that a challenge for a scientist, a quick fire?
Who knows? We'll see.
Okay. All right. Um, Nancy asks, in addition to watering deeply to remove salt, would adding gypsum help?
Yeah, I have read that gypsum can really help with salt for sure, but you want to make sure that that's something that would be appropriate given your pH.
Okay. Do you recommend adding milky spore bacterium for grub control? That's from Ralph. Do you know?
I've never heard of that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Carol, do you have any thoughts on that?
That's one of those biocontrols, and yeah, I would say follow the package instructions if you're going to use it. But I think that organic growers that view it pretty positively.
Okay, I'll also look on the Fine Gardening website and see if we have anything specifically about grubs, maybe that could help with that.
Mhm.
Um, okay, and so for an older garden, from let's see. Okay, so she gardens organically, but it seems very compacted. Would adding washed sand help for compaction?
No, it
Okay.
wouldn't. Because like sand, when we're thinking back to like the pore space situation, sand is really, if you have like really, really clayey soil, I've heard about people adding sand along with a lot of organic matter, and that can work. But instead, I definitely would be incorporating organic matter, like as
Yep.
many different kinds as you can. If you can get away with like taking it out of like maybe taking it out of rotation for a season and putting some like daikon or some kind of like deep rooted cover crop in there to break up that compaction, and then you leave it there to rot. It smells bad, so if you're in like a nice neighborhood, maybe don't do it. I've heard stories, but um, there's options as far as like plants that'll break up compaction, and you can find beautiful plants that will break up compaction also. And then also just organic matter. It's always the answer.
Yes, and the soil life does a surprisingly good job of creating spore spaces. You just need to give it enough time and enough organic matter to fuel the growth. But yeah.
100%. You're right. Yeah, I agree.
Hmm, okay. Let's see. For raised beds, for the soil in raised beds, um, I guess this is David. He said it's his first year growing vegetables in raised beds. Is there anything he should do differently, I guess, in a raised bed rather than in the ground? Um,
I I think the main thing top of mind for that would be you would want to mulch, right? So you could use straw, you could use wood mulch, whatever, because raised beds can dry out more quickly. So besides that, like I'm very pro raised beds for vegetables. I think that's the way to go. Basically, your only concern is that it will dry out more quickly because like there's more soil exposed to the air and the sun and such. So if you mulch, and it's great to really mulch your paths too. You know what I mean? Keep the weeds down, and that's feeding the soil also. So that would be the one leading difference in sort of a typical garden or a raised bed garden management.
okay. Um, so we have with the compaction questions keep coming.
Yeah, compaction's hard.
Compaction is hard. Um,
But bum.
Yeah.
oh, you
Good
didn't
one.
even hear.
I missed that.
Um, let's see. Okay, I'm trying to find a way to summarize this. I think the questions are just, what can people do? And I think I don't want to, make you a broken record that with compaction, it's really just adding more organic matter. We're talking about there's a path between houses that's very compacted. Um, it says the landscapers started to come through with a machine extracting pods, I guess of soil, maybe. And one path is still stubborn. I'm not sure. Um, Not sure about that one. But there's, yeah, another.
So
And
Go ahead.
compaction, I guess, like, I think something that I haven't talked about yet that's important to talk about is a penetrometer. So a penetrometer is a piece of equipment that basically measures compaction in the soil in pounds per square inch, like PSI, right? So we know that anything over 300 PSI is root growth limiting. So you can buy a penetrometer yourself, especially if you're like a professional landscaper. They usually have them, or you can borrow one, typically from like your cooperative extension agent. We lend them out for people who are submitting soil samples to our lab. But basically, what it does is you go out and you push it evenly into the soil and you mentally record and then record on our submission form like where you see compaction. So did you see compaction at 3 inches down? Probably not, but did you see compaction at 8 inches down? That's what you'll see a lot. So a penetrometer is a really, really good step when you have compaction in identifying, well, where is that compaction? And then you can make educated decisions about how you're going to alleviate that compaction based on how deep into the soil profile it is.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. Um, I know we're nearing the end here. Carol, what do you think, in terms of one or two more questions, you think?
yeah, I think we have time for one or two more. We've got them.
Okay. So boy, there's some good questions here. I'm not sure how to address them all, but here's one that stands out to me just because this has been sort of a trend recently is are there do you have any suggestions or cautions about using hugelkultur? Um,
Oh.
Oh yeah. I love Google culture actually. I think it's super interesting. Um, I mean, okay, so for Google culture, I probably wouldn't like necessarily do it in like my main garden. I probably would do it as like a side project and then see how it goes. But the basic idea, if anyone doesn't know, is you like stack up a bunch of sticks of like varying sizes, and then you kind of add probably topsoil that you buy, organic matter, etc., and then you plant in that. And what's cool about it is that the wood holds a lot of water, and releases it slowly. And it's actually being used in serious desert situations, like in China, in the Ningxia province. They are incorporating, well, more like wood chips. So it's sort of like a modified hugel culture situation, but they like add a bunch of wood chips to desert sand and then organic matter, and then they irrigate it, right? And they are actually finding that they can farm in the desert incorporating these methods. So, it's like you can kind of modify it for yourself and like incorporate in some like wood chips into your soil, although you have to be really careful with your carbon nitrogen ratio because if you have too much carbon, it actually ties up your nitrogen. It gets complicated. Um, but so I have this like 2 acres and woods, and I have this big pile of sticks that's like really too hard to move. And somebody suggested, they were like, oh, you should turn it into hugel culture. And I was like, 100%. Like, so I'm planning on trying it in this one spot. And yeah, I'm pro. I think it's actually on the cutting edge of some of the things that we're going to be seeing to be more sustainable, especially in dry environments moving forward.
Yeah, but like, if you're thinking about it, do your research. Burying cordwood in your front yard does not constitute Google
Yeah,
culture.
exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's a science itself.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Um, for maybe this last question, just because we've had a couple of people write in about managing pH, and some people want to get their pH up, some need to get it down. Is there I guess organic, in terms of adding organic matter that might do one or the other, or is lime the best way if you're trying to, um, what is it, make it more base?
Yeah, so changing your pH is really not that hard. Um, it's basically, like, yeah, we use lime, there's gypsum, there's like all of these different options to move it up, to move it down. Ideally, you want to stay in like the six, between 6 and 7. Some people say 6 to 6.5, some people say 6.5 to 7. But basically, like that 6.5 is the kind of perfect pH for a lot of things, right? So a couple things. One, I would say like let's say you have like super low pH, it's better to just work with plants that like low pH. Or you have super high pH, same thing. Like there's a ton of amazing opportunities out there for really cool species that are at like the far ends of the spectrum. Because if you're changing it, which you can do, we've been working on this for 100 years at least, you have to do it every year. So you can't permanently change your soil's pH. It's going to be something that you're constantly working at. But there's so much information out there, like test your soil first. And a typical soil nutrient analysis lab will say, add 20 pounds of lime or whatever it is, you know what I mean, and tell you exactly how to get your pH to what you're looking for.
Yes, and your local agricultural extension folks are also a great resource for plant lists for, plants that will do well in your region soil.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. I I'm thinking we're probably out of time. I don't know if Kirsten, you might be willing to stay a couple minutes just to talk a little bit about your soil paintings, because that was just I think that's so cool, and I'm not sure people know about that. And then if there was any maybe current research you're doing at the lab that you might find it in your heart to share with us, if for us, dirt geeks.
Yeah, of course.
Is that okay,
Um,
Carol? If
Oh
like,
yeah, let's
okay,
do it.
right.
Yeah, so my undergrad's in fine art, so I developed a way to paint with soil about 10 years ago. I actually save samples that come into our lab if it comes from like a safe area. And because we get soil from around the world, so I don't paint with like international samples for a whole long list of reasons. But basically, I'll save samples that come into our lab, and then I create these paintings with them. This is one of them on the screen here. This is called Peace or Chernosem, and it's about like the deep, fertile soil that's in Europe. Chernosem soil, which is like the mollisol here. Anyway, so I paint with soil as a way to engage the public with soil science. Also because I'm an artist, and anyone who's an artist knows you like can't help yourself, you have to paint. Um, and also like on commission. So I paint on commission a lot. And then I also hold events, where I invite the public to create soil paintings with me. So it's just kind of an example of a way that I've made my job like a little more fun and creative and engaging. Um, and then as far as the lab goes, we're doing a lot of, so we don't do a lot of research in our lab. We're really like an analytical lab. So we're receiving samples, um, testing it through, the most comprehensive soil health test on the planet, and then reporting those results back to our clients in a way that's easy to understand. Um, but we're doing some interesting things here with there's like the NAPT program, which is basically like certifies labs. And they've now developed that certification for soil health labs. So we're really excited about that. And we're going to start doing that with them. And then we're also just like always making sure that we're staying on the cutting edge and like, you know, refining our analyses, making sure that, we're providing information that is directly linked to management, right? So like we're interested in assessing your soil and being able to like actually tell the difference between a soil that's been managed really well and not managed really well based on the tests. So it seems kind of obvious, but it's something that you're always like refining, and that is a hard thing to kind of like get to be sure that you're picking up on real life scenarios for understanding your soil health. And then, of course, I do a lot of communication work. Um, and always kind of expanding that and just like getting out there and talking to audiences as much as possible about the importance of soil.
We certainly appreciate your expertise. This has been an amazing hour. Thank you so much for doing this. I wanted to mention for the participants, we have another resource on our website. This article put the life back into your soil, which was in issue 172. Was written by Bob Schindelbeck, who was also at the Cornell Soil Health Lab. And this article sort of was focused on ideas that Soil Health Lab is promoting as far as land use and how to take care of your soil.
Yeah, he
So
really, Bob Schittelbeck's the director of our lab, and he's just an amazing expert on, soil and gardening, and he's, taught me everything I know. So that's a great article. I enjoyed that
yeah,
one too.
That,
yeah, well,
not to, insert myself, Bob also did a class in our sustainable gardening course.
oh, that's right.
Which was also really fascinating. And so if I don't know how many folks are members of Fine Gardening All Access here, but you can access that course for free on our website. And there's some, great information if you want more info on this there. And then I'll also just drop a link, a little self-promotion here. If anyone is interested in joining as an all access member, I'll give you a little link here in the chat.
Absolutely. And if you're a print subscriber, it is possible to upgrade to an all access membership. And I feel like the e-learning courses that are part of membership like that's worth the price of admission alone. So, and you can find a lot of similar webinars to this one at our website as well, finegardening.com.
I'm like,
All
ooh, just started reading the chats, but I know we don't have time. Like,
right.
oh, that's a good question.
Hey, I don't think if you want to take them, I think we're okay, but it's up to you. I know it is Friday and it was an early morning.
Yeah, no problem. But it's cool to see. I mean, I just love this audience. Like they so clearly really understand soil, it's so amazing.
Yeah, fine gardening folks are the absolute best.
I
Thank
agree.
you all for coming. Thank you, Kirsten, again for being
Thank
our
you.
expert. And what a valuable hour. I'm sure we're all going to be watching this again later. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. It was so fun. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you everyone for the great questions. It was cool. It was good to think about soil in a new way.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.